Hi everybody, welcome back to one of our weekly videos. So glad you're joining me today, whether you're joining me live in the Facebook group or if you're watching the recording. Super excited to talk about freezer meals today. Last week's video I talked a lot about how to still eat well when life gets a little busy, and I talked a lot about how I use my freezer to make that easier for my family. So I'm excited to share with you some tips and techniques and some specific ideas of what you can start freezing to make that even easier on yourself. So thanks for joining me today. If this is your first time seeing these videos or meeting me, hi, I'm Danielle. I am a National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach, and I'm a plant-based nutrition educator. So I have a YouTube channel and a private Facebook group called Healthy Living with Danielle Dinkelman, and that's really where I teach you and share with you how you can upgrade your nutrition, how you can prioritize your self-care, and how to take charge of your habits. So that's kind of my drive and my passion, is to help people with that. So thanks for joining me today. If that's the type of help you're looking for, you're in the right place. So let's get right to it. First of all, shout out to Sarah and Catherine for commenting on last week's video with some follow-up questions on how do we do these freezer meals, Danielle, and what containers do you use, and how do I keep it from breaking in the freezer? How, what foods freeze well and what foods don't freeze well? So I really appreciate the feedback. I'm really excited to help you with those things today. So we're going to get right into it. The reason I think that you should really consider using your freezer more, if you are moving to upgrade your nutrition, especially in the direction of a whole food, plant-based way of eating, creating your own convenience foods can be life-changing, because a lot of the convenience foods that we buy out there are full of stuff that we don't want anymore. It's full of dairy, it's full of eggs and sugar and oils and all these things that we know don't really support our health as much. So I love creating my own convenience foods, because I still am a normal, busy mom, and I need convenience, I need ease. So I need to maximize the time that I'm spending in the kitchen, which is what I talked about in last week's video. So I'm going to show you a little bit how I do that. So first of all, so I'm going to share 4 things with you today. Number 1, I want to share with you how I want you to maybe start rethinking this idea of freezer meals. We're going to reinvent that a little bit to make it easier on you. Number 2, I'm going to show you the containers that I use personally and share a little bit of tips and techniques of how to not have stuff break on you or things leaking as you're thawing stuff out. And then number 3, I'm going to tell you what foods you can rely on in putting in the freezer, what types of foods you can use. I'm going to give you some examples. And then number 4, we're going to talk about what foods you should not be putting in the freezer, because it won't turn out well. You won't be happy with the result. So we're going to dive right in. Number 1, I do want you to rethink the construct you have for what a freezer meal is. So when I, got married and started having kids and started really figuring out this domestic lifestyle thing and cooking my own food, freezer meals in my mind was always, okay, it's got to be like this all-in-one casserole that I put in a foil pan in the freezer, and then voila, I have a freezer meal that I can pull out and either thaw out and then put in the oven or put directly in to cook. Same thing, a lot of the freezer meals that I made early on were things that you'd throw together in like a Ziploc bag, and then you would freeze it pre-cooked, and then when you pull it out, you throw it in your crock pot, and then voila, you have this complete meal ready to go for you that basically came out of the freezer. Now, that is not the type of freezer meals that I do anymore, and I'm going to tell you a little bit why. My construct is more, I'm just looking to create, like I said, kind of convenience foods, or the components of what I could then put a meal together with. Okay, so I'm not looking for an entire lasagna that I can make the whole thing, put it in the freezer, and then have it ready to go later. No, I want to just streamline my process as much as possible. Like I said in last week's video, I want to maximize the time that I'm already spending in the kitchen. I don't want to spend more time than I was going to anyway, okay? So this is where I want you to kind of break your meals into components and ask yourself, is there a component of this favorite meal or that favorite meal that I know my family likes that I could start using the freezer for, that when I make that one component, I can double or triple it, put it in the freezer for next time that I want this meal. And maybe the other components are really easy to throw together. Like, a perfect example is our favorite spaghetti. I'm actually gonna make that for dinner tonight. Now, I don't have a reservoir of my sauce in my freezer anymore, so I will be making it fresh tonight, but you better bet I'm not making one batch of that spaghetti sauce. It's delicious, but it takes a little bit of time to put together, so I'm gonna maximize that time by doubling or tripling the batch in my crock pot. So think about freezer meals more in components. Of course, I'm not thinking about making an entire spaghetti meal with the sauce and the pasta and then freezing it. That's not what we're talking about here. I'm just gonna think, oh wow, I'm making this sauce anyway. I'm gonna freeze a bunch of this for later. And then on a busy weeknight, I can just say, yeah, I've got spaghetti sauce in the freezer, yank it out, cook up some pasta. That does not take any time at all. Quick and easy, okay? That's kind of what I think of as a freezer meal. Okay, so number 2, I told you I would show you and talk to you about containers. This is crucial because if you use the wrong containers or if you use them in the wrong way, you can risk spoiling the food that you worked so hard to create. So most common, of course, is using a Ziploc bag for freezer meals. Now, I did this for years, but when I started freezing more of my pasta sauces or more of my soups, when I would put them in a water bath to thaw out, I would notice these little corners would have burst open and I'm losing food and I'm leaking some of the sauces out of here. So I became really disillusioned with the Ziploc bag solution. So I want to show you a couple other options that you have, and then I'll show you my favorite option. These are just plastic Rubbermaid containers. This is what I put most of my leftovers in. This is the sort of thing that I keep all my food organized in the kitchen. It's affordable. I didn't have to break the bank on this. You'll learn really quickly, you guys, that I am really practical. So I'm not gonna go out, and I'm not gonna tell you to go out and buy all new containers that cost a truckload of money. So if you have something like this, just so you know, these can go in the freezer. This is totally fine. So if you have something like this, and you want to start freezing some things, go ahead and use them. The trick for freezing successfully without losing food or damaging your containers is to not overfill them. So maybe you already know this, but some people might not. When you put food, especially food that has a lot of liquid content in it, it will expand when it freezes. Okay, so if I'm putting my spaghetti sauce in this container, I should not be filling it up all the way. In fact, I'm probably gonna try to keep it below this line, if not a little bit shy of that, just to be safe. And then of course that lid is really gonna fit over the top, right? So again, we wanna be a little bit lower than that, give it space to expand. And then you won't have any problems with this, okay? Another option is you can use glass mason jars. Now this is actually a freezer-friendly, it's marketed as a freezer-friendly mason jar. So why is this freezer-friendly and not your traditional mason jar? It's because it is straight. If you grab your normal quart size or pint mason jar, you know, it has the curve to it right at the top, right? Well, you can imagine if you fill that right underneath that curve with your spaghetti sauce or enchilada sauce or whatever you're freezing, and as it expands, you are in a high risk of it bursting the top of a normal narrow-mouthed jar. But with something like this that's totally straight, you're not gonna have any problems. So this was just washed from, I had thawed out some enchilada sauce that I'd made months ago, you guys. The enchilada sauce that I make is delicious, but it's a little involved. So I loved having that in the freezer. I could just pull it out. So this is a great option for sauces. I have a bunch of these. I do use them, but I'm going to show you my favorite thing that I use now, and that is these take-home containers. So I I got this tip from a friend of mine that brought me a meal once, and it was in these containers, and I had to find out more about them. They're just restaurant take-home containers. So you can just Google this, and Google a local restaurant supply store, and you can walk in there, and I bought a whole stack of 3 different sizes of these containers, and they are just perfect. So I love them. They're more reusable than your Ziploc bags, and they do really well. Again, they're narrow, just like that jar, so that's not gonna, I have not had these burst and break on me yet, because I'm really good at not overfilling the containers. You'll learn that lesson quickly. Okay, so there's some container ideas. Start with what you've got, but if you want to add some things to your supplies, then there's some ideas for you. Okay, so I want to go ahead and give you some ideas of what meals you can freeze. And more than meals, I want to give you some guidelines of what types of foods can go in the freezer totally confidently, totally safely, okay? So I have 4 ideas to give you, things that you can freeze, okay? Number 1, you can freeze cooked grains. Okay, so for example, I have a Spanish rice that I actually just shared this week inside of our private Facebook group. I freeze that all the time. I put it in one of these containers, and actually I made it like a double or triple batch of this, maybe. I think it was a double batch. And I have like 5 or 6 of these in my freezer now, and that's gonna last me a while. I have a rice pilaf that's in my recipe book that's available on my website. I freeze that one all the time. Again, anything that's kind of a cooked grain, if you have a quinoa dish that you like, that can go in the freezer. Okay, so grains. Number 2, you can freeze any cooked legume. Okay, that's just a fancy word for beans and lentils. So to give you some ideas, there's a lentil loaf in here that you could freeze. I make a lentil sloppy joe, lentil taco mix. I have a rice and bean taco mix that's also in my recipe book, and I put that in the freezer all the time. It's really no big deal. And then when I just want something cooked that I can throw into something new that I'm making, you can just batch cook big things of chickpeas or lentils. Don't do anything to them, and put those in Ziploc bags or in containers and throw those in the freezer, and then they're cooked and ready for you when you need to throw them in a soup or throw them into a taco mix. Okay, so grains, legumes. You can freeze sauces, okay? I have so many sauces that I depend on in my house. We have a nacho sauce that we depend on. I mentioned our spaghetti sauce, enchilada sauce, gravy, pad thai sauce, Alfredo. I have a cauliflower Alfredo in my recipe book that freezes fantastically. All of these things, I love that they freeze well because they take a little bit of extra time, a few more ingredients, and a few more steps usually to make, but I always don't shy away from going through those steps because I know I'm maximizing that time because I'm doubling or tripling it and I'm putting it in the freezer for another day. So you're welcome. This will make your life so much easier, and you can still be eating these healthy plant-based foods that you want to be eating. Okay, the 4th thing that I wanted to tell you that you can freeze safely is any cooked soups that are full of these grains and legumes, and also cooked vegetables. So again, in my recipe book, there's a vegetable barley soup in there. There is a there's a chickpea noodle soup. There's a vegetable minestrone, and there's a chili. All of those can be made and put in the freezer. Now here's the caveat: do not add the pasta and then freeze it, unless you really want mushy pasta at the end when you pull it out of the freezer and cook it for your family. Which brings me to the next thing I wanted to share, which is the things not to freeze. Okay, do not freeze cooked potatoes, and do not freeze cooked pasta. And do not freeze things that you will not be, do not freeze sauces that you will not be reheating. So for example, I have a cashew sour cream that I make. Don't freeze that. The texture gets totally weird, and it's just strange. So don't freeze that. But any sauce that you are going to heat up, that process makes it creamy again, and you can add a little bit of liquid. Maybe I'll do another follow-up video if you guys want on showing you what that actually looks like, that process. So that's kind of it, guys. So I hope that kind of helps you with what you can start doing, what you can start freezing. Start taking a look at the recipes you're already making. Maybe go check out the Healthier Home Family Meal Plan on my website and see if that has some recipes that you would like to add to your rotation for your family, and make this easier on yourself. It's got to be easy if we're going to make it sustainable, right? So that's all I've got for you today. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what questions you have. Like I said, I love feedback. I'd be happy to create more follow-up videos if you'd like to see more, and however I can help you understand how to take the next step for you, I'm happy to do it. So have a great weekend, and I will see you next time.